So let's start step 4, where I suggest we do some data formatting and conversion using pipes in Angular. Pipes are a software block in Angular that ultimately offers a whole arsenal of tools to help us build much more efficient and much faster web applications. Among these tools are the components we used in the previous step, and as we'll see, there are honestly quite a few more that we'll discover in the upcoming steps of this course. As for pipes, this is a particularly important topic. It's a tool that is often underused by junior developers, and as we start to explore other aspects of Angular, we realize that pipes actually have a significant impact on performance. When used properly, we can achieve some really interesting things with them. In this step then, we're just going to dust off pipes a little by using what are called native pipes. In fact, Angular already provides us with pipes. We'll be able to create our own later on, but Angular offers pipes directly within the Angular framework. A pipe should be seen as a function that modifies data for display purposes. For example, you might receive a number or a date formatted in a certain way. I don't know if you've noticed, but dates in particular often come in a rather unusual format. It's often the year, dashes the month, dashes the day. Depending on the format, you might have a capital T, then the hour, minutes, seconds, and so on. It's a format that, for an average user, is impossible to read. Well, impossible in the sense that it's not the most easily readable format. What we like to see is something like the 27th of June, 2024, for example, and even then, it changes depending on the country. Some countries want the month before the day, and so on. So there's a real need to change how a raw, let's say, computer value is displayed. That's where Angular comes into play, and not just Angular either. We'll also see that, in addition to that, Angular pipes can be used for other things as well, but that's their main purpose. So I suggest we create native pipes, use native pipes mainly, the simpler ones, but there are actually many more. But these are the easiest ones to set up. Number, date, and JSON. The purpose of the number pipe is to format the numbers we use in TypeScript by adding 1,000 separators and a separator for decimal numbers. This also depends on the country. Some use a comma, others a period, and you could imagine other cases as well. As I explained just before, date is the typical example. Either we store what we call a timestamp, which is the number of seconds since the 1st of January, 1970, or we try to be a bit more precise. If we want to record the date beforehand, etc., we'll use other formats. But in any case, what we usually want is to display a date that's readable for the user. So we'll use this pipe here. If we have even more specific needs, we'll have to create our own pipes. And then there's the JSON pipe, which is mainly used for debugging purposes. When we're building our application, we like to use this pipe because it will display an entire JSON file. And if we take a look at how a JSON object is displayed in HTML, we'll see that HTML shows something a bit odd. It's just brackets with object, object. So we can't actually read what's inside the object. This pipe allows us to do that, to go through an entire object and display it completely. Another small thing that I mentioned in the introductory video on how to use this course, but especially here in step 4, is that you can directly see what was changed in the code during this step. Here, I specifically changed this line to this one. That is, I used the number pipe. That's pretty important to notice. It's a pipe, a vertical bar that says, this variable here, amount. Why is it a variable? Mainly because there are double curly braces. The double curly braces will interpret what's inside them. So amount will be the variable contained in the TypeScript. The pipe will apply the number transformation function. Later on, we can add additional parameters to further specify this transformation function. In any case, I suggest you try using this display, the number pipe, by using the 3 different pipes, number, date, and JSON. Try creating a TypeScript number and a TypeScript date. When I say TypeScript, I obviously mean JavaScript, but since we're working with Angular, we're writing in TypeScript. So a number variable, a date variable, and a JSON variable. For example, the JSON will be a slightly complex object. You can add as many as you want. Just make sure to go at least 2 levels deep so we can clearly see that the JSON pipe is able to read inside, whereas if we don't use the JSON pipe, we won't be able to look inside the object. I'll let you do that. Now, let's take a look together at what we've set up. Let's explain it a bit. So for my amount variable, I made it a bit larger than before so that we can see the thousands separator and also display one decimal place. This is done using the number pipe I showed just before. Let's focus only on the display here. We can see that even though on the JavaScript side, so here in TypeScript I have a number without any thousands separator. Here, Angular manages to separate the thousands with a comma and the decimals with a dot. It's also important to note that Angular, by default, uses English formatting, so it separates with commas, whereas in France, we usually separate with spaces. We'll also see later on that we can change this behavior through something fairly complex in Angular, which we'll refer to as DI tokens, for dependency injection tokens. That will be a major topic that we'll cover much later. We'll be able to modify all these configuration aspects of pipes and many other things. In the end, using it is quite simple. When we use a number pipe, IntelliJ immediately suggests importing decimal pipe. This is the decimal pipe that will be used by the number pipe. We also have, as I've shown here, if you look just below June 25th, 2025, which is a rather English style date format, because in France, we would more likely say 25th of June, 2025. In English, the month and day are usually reversed. But what's important here is that this is the way it's displayed. And if I go check in TypeScript, what I just have a plain date, which is quite different because if I display the date directly here, I get something like this, except that it's not particularly readable. There's a lot of information you can't get or that might not be relevant to us. That's why this is interesting. That's what you really need to understand about pipes. Pipes take raw data and modify how it's displayed. That's very important. The benefit of this is mainly that you always have a single source of truth, a single source of data that comes from one place and can be displayed differently, depending on where you use it. And finally, I specifically used the JSON pipe with a file story, a rather large JSON object with sub-objects and arrays within those objects. I had a bit of fun with it and added quite a few little things. And you can see that our object here is completely readable, all the way down. You can see all the data inside it. I can do the same exercise to see the benefit and specifically what we could have had. As I was saying, if we don't use this JSON pipe and we want to display a JSON file again, mainly for debugging purposes, since we rarely do this in production, displaying the contents of a JSON object, end up with this kind of display, which is completely unreadable. This pipe can be useful to take a look at all of that. As for just this particular part, we've pretty much thoroughly covered it. Next, we will now move on to this next important part, which is essentially creating our very own custom pipe.